Good evening, everyone. Michelle Olshan here. This is diploma, certificate for mental health COM002. It's the third final session for COM002, which is use communication to build relationships. First and foremost, I want to apologise for last week, for any inconvenience that was caused to anyone for last week's session. Unfortunately, I had an immediate and urgent family matter I had to attend to, and it was unavoidable. And my apologies for any inconvenience that might have caused. I am aware there is a student who has yet to receive the link for last week's class, so I'll double check on that. That could be because of reception difficulties. We know that in a country as big as Australia, not even the same kind of, access to Wi-Fi, but I will do a double check to make sure that it was sent out to you. Tonight's session, before we begin, welcome to everyone. I hope you've had a great week. Really, I'm sure that you're looking forward to having a public holiday tomorrow, and good to take some time out and do something for yourself or relax if that's what your day is looking like being. I know it's going to be for me. So anyway, I hope it's the same for you. I've got a few things that I'm going to run through this evening. So I've got a few PowerPoints I'm going to be bringing up and putting aside, all that kind of stuff. I'll start with that. What I want to do first off is to do our usual housekeeping. No, what I want to do first off is to share my contact details with you. Okay, so this is how you can contact me via email, and you can do that anytime. I do work part-time. I will respond to you when I do get to your email during the week. Any support regarding teaching and assessment, all that kind of stuff, feel free to contact me. You can also book a time into my calendar schedule for a 30-minute learner support phone call, and you can book directly. My calendar schedule, I will let you know now, is Mondays, 1:30 to 5:30. However, and my schedule does book up. So if you find that you're not able to book in a time, then, feel free to just book in, contact Hayder directly and book in with another trainer. If you need some clarification around any teaching and assessment or anything like that. So I'm always welcome to, you're always welcome to contact me. But if you, don't want to wait for a couple of weeks, if it looks like my schedule is booked up, and it may be becoming booked up because we're booking in role plays, then please know that other trainers, we all do these phone calls, learner support phone calls. And so I would encourage you to contact Hayder directly to book in a support call. And you can do that through that phone number here, which is 8362 3113, or you can go straight through to their email, info@hayderinstitute.edu.au. They're the contact details too. If you want any support around your enrolment related matters, or any IT related matters, best just to go straight to the heart, right? If you go through me, I'm only going to have to refer you anyway. So this is why I did this PowerPoint. Just so that it actually helps to streamline things so that you're not wasting your time. I don't want you, everybody's working and busy. I know that, and we know that at Hayder. So we're trying to sort of ensure that we can provide some, streamlined processes for you. Any information or support around work placement, contact Clodagh Carmody. Clodagh, she can be contacted by email, clodagh.c@hayderinstitute.edu.au. So in terms of work placement, Seb, for instance, if you wanted to find out about, what's the process next for me, where am I going to, best, as I said, to contact Clodagh directly. If you, on the other hand, want to know, what do I have to do? What sort of assessment do I have to do for my course? I can help you with that, because that's to do with teaching and assessment. CLOTA is the person to contact around those work placement arrangements, where they're at, all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, I just wanted to share that with you, and just take a note, and I hope that that will help to streamline things for you. So I'm going to stop sharing that one. Any questions around that? Nope. Okay. Okay. Right. The other thing that I wanted to do is to, I'm going to have to bring it up. Sorry, I'm going to do run through the assessment with everyone. The assessment, I'm just finding it, is sorry, I'm just trying to find it. No, that's not working. All right, we will start. Start the slideshow, and I will come back to that later. Okay, this is session 3 of COM002. I am going to be running through the assessments. Here we go. Role play assessment. Can you see that? Role play assessment. I have some feedback here. Let me see if I can bring it up again. Yeah, here we go. I will go through it now. So the COM002 role play and assessment, there's quite a few things involved here. So I just thought that I would take my time to go through it a bit, the requirements, just to help to clarify what's required. You've got a few role plays that you have to do. It is all in your learner guide and the information online for you. So please ensure that you access everything, read everything up very, very closely, and will help you to prepare, because I think for these assessments for COM002, you need to be quite prepared for it and quite structured for it. The requirements for this unit, apart from your, you know, the assessment task 1 is always your knowledge questions, which is your theory. There's also task 2 for COM002, which is a case scenario. And I recommend that you do that task 2. You need to do that task 2 with the case scenario before you do the task 3 role play, because the task 3 role play is a follow-on from that case scenario. All right, so you will find it, you won't be as well prepared, you won't be prepared nearly as much for the task 3 role play if you haven't already done the task 2, because there's a continuance with the story. We take that's case scenario into the role play scenario. So what you need, so that's my first thing. So take some notes if it helps you. First thing is to get on board and do your task 2 case scenario. Okay. I mean, certainly do your task 1 as well, but just do them in order. What you need to do after that, your task 2, is you do need to facilitate one meeting around a workplace issue. And task 3 has got a couple of different tasks, subtasks associated with it. So you do need to facilitate a meeting. You do need to obtain feedback from 3 colleagues. In this instance, it will be the colleagues for ease of purpose. With your role play, you will be in a small group of with 3 other people. So you need to obtain feedback from 2 of your colleagues in that role play on the effectiveness of your communication and how you responded to the issues, right, in the role play. So that's really part of that's at the end of the role play. Okay, you need to seek feedback. That's something else you need to do. You do need to prepare 3 types of written correspondence in accordance with organisation communication protocols. And these are, these are all listed. You don't choose yourself what you have to do. It's actually all very structured and listed, but you need to be prepared for it because it's all in a sequence, kind of in a sequence anyway. And then you need to do another role play, which is task 4. So that task 4 role play is that you need to facilitate resolution of a difficult situation with a client, a colleague, or a service provider. And in this particular instance, there is a role play. There is a case scenario for task 4, and it's all linked in. But the actual sort of role play really is with an interpreter, where you're engaging with an interpreter, and we'll go into that detail further down. So as I said, the task 3 role play scenario is to facilitate a meeting regarding a work health and safety issue. And so the role play meeting is a follow on from the task 2 case scenario. So you need to have completed that first. So there are 4 roles involved in this role play. So you need to connect to, like, form a group with 3 other students. So you might want to start thinking about that tonight, who your 3 other students might be in your group. And you will be assessed on your role as the meeting facilitator. You do have documents that you need to prepare for that meeting, and these documents will need to be submitted as part of your assessment. So when you go into, or I don't know if you've sort of checked out yet the requirements of the role play, but there is a fictitious, a hypothetical community service organisation called First Access, and the link to that you will find in your learner book. So you link into that, and that will provide you with all the information that you need. You need to prepare an agenda, and this whole scenario it's like a story, really. There's an incident that has occurred. Okay, that's your task 2 case scenario. And all of the organisation that you're working with, hypothetically, is First Access. Okay, so First Access in the organisation, they have responded to this incident. All right, and on the basis of that response, you will receive an email that is written to you, all students, from a staff member from First Access, saying that you are to convene a meeting and facilitate a meeting, which is a safety and respect meeting, a team. And in that email, she lists the kinds of topics or the points that she wants you to cover in that first meeting. So this is where the preparation comes in. Read it all very carefully. So your agenda for your first meeting of the safety and respect team, your agenda really needs to reflect very clearly what it is that Lou Allen Fox from First Access, what she tells you in her email to you in response to the incident that has occurred in the organisation. So these are the documents that you need to prepare. You need to include them. It all needs to be prepared beforehand, and you need to include them in your role play and your assessment. And you also need to submit them as part of your assessment. We're not just assessing your role play. There's different parts of task 3, right? There's documentation you need to submit as well as your role play link. We can't assess your task 3 until we've got all of that, till you've submitted it all. So this is what you need to prepare. There's a document, which is an agenda. Okay, the template is in the information that you've got. Okay, and the points to be discussed, all of that guidance is in there. You need to select 4 appropriate people, right, from the First Access staff directory. So again, you'll need to link into this hypothetical organisation called First Access and their staff directory and choose the most appropriate people to come along, to be invited to the first safety and respect team meeting. Now, as part of the assessment, you will be assessed as to whether you have chosen the most appropriate people according to this topic. You need to email those people, right, explaining the purpose of the safety and respect team and the aims of the meeting. The time, date, location of your first meeting. You need to include a full agenda, right, in your email, and you need to use the First Access email template. And the focus of this is that you need to follow workplace protocols of First Access. So you get in, have a good look around, and make sure that you've done all that front end work and preparation to get yourself ready and in the space to be conducting your for your role play, which is your meeting, and also to have the documents ready that you need, which is part of the assessment, because they all need to be submitted. So conducting the task 3 role play. So you're to facilitate the first meeting of the safety and respect team. You need to have a clear agenda, you need to follow the agenda, and you need to submit the agenda as part of your assessment using the template and making sure you follow workplace protocols of First Access. You also need to write up the minutes. There is a template for the minutes. Find the template and use that. So I suggest, you can either allocate the minutes for somebody else to take, but I think that it's just probably easier for you to jot up your own minutes. Take notes during your meeting that you're facilitating, like literally take notes. Maybe you might want to download a copy of that template and take notes into the template and then type them up later. And then you need to submit, when you're happy with the content of your minutes, that they accurately reflect what needs to be reflected in minute taking, then you need to submit that as well as part of your assessment. At the end of your meeting, so you finish your meeting, you need to think about how you're going to finish up that meeting, how you're going to end it, right? It doesn't need to be a long half-hour meeting. It can't be. We don't have that kind of time. So make it short and sweet, a good meeting is a quick meeting, a focused meeting. So think about how you're going to wrap up that meeting. Endings need to be planned. You go through things, you wrap it up. We will continue your recording of your role play because, of your assessment, because what you need to do then is move on to another task, which is you need to seek feedback from 2 students who are a part of your assessment group, right? And there is a template in your information that you have that you need to sort of apply or ask. So you can have that discussion with those 2 people, seek their feedback. Perhaps, you do what you think suits you best, but one way you could do it again is to download and print out that template, get 2 copies and talk to one person, get feedback from one person, ask the questions on the template and jot down their responses, and then go to the second person. I mean, I can put we can finish things up and people can go into a breakout room so that you can have a separate room with that person and get their feedback. Then I can put that person into a breakout room, can then bring the second person onto the screen, and you can seek their feedback around how they felt you conducted the meeting, your communication style, what have you. And you can jot down notes in your template. And then afterwards, you can type those notes up for those 2 documents from the feedback you received. And with that, they are submitted as part of your evidence for your assessment. Any questions so far? Are you with me or am I going too fast? All good? All right, I'm going to keep going. I just thought that I would take the time to go through this because I think it can be confusing. And yes, Cass, how can I help you? No, I can't hear you, Cass.
Sorry, I'm not up to this part of my assessments and I am totally confused. I don't know if anyone else is this far. Like, I'm not up to this in my assessments and have no idea.
Okay, well, that's all right, right? Let me just, I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm just confused. I have no idea what you're
Okay, well,
going
I think
to.
what you need to do is after I record this introduction and explanation around the assessment, which I will continue to do so that you've got the file and it's on record and you can refer back to it if you want to, is that go to your learner guide and have a read of the assessment requirements and then use my explanation
All right, thank you.
to clarify it. So that because it's, I just wanted to get it on record. I know that people are at different parts and at different places, and there's probably no kind of real easy way of doing it. And I just thought, well, look, if you can refer back to my explanation, right, then that might help you. And if you've got any questions following from that, then you're welcome to email me or book a time in with me. But I was kind of hoping to start, I mean, it's really up to you when you want to schedule, when you feel like you're ready to schedule your role play. But as I said, you've got to do it in a group of 4 people, right? You and 3 other people. So, yeah, I think that you might want to sort of have a read, start having a read and start having a think about it and see how you might be able, like when you think you might be able to be ready and who you might connect to, to help you do this. Lena, can I help you?
Yes.
So,
I just want
how do we connect to other people?
Sorry, hang on, wait a minute. Got 2 people talking. Sorry, Lena, just one moment, I'll finish. Cass has still got another question. How do you connect to people, Cass?
Yeah,
Well,
how do we do that?
well, there are some groups that have got a WhatsApp, and I don't know if you do or not. Some people are connected to each other. All right. Some people do have a connection. If you do have a connection with people, or you can maybe on the chat box, you can randomly put yourself into a group of 4 and let me know. Or if you're happy for me, just to randomly put you into a group of 4 people and schedule you and say, this is your time and you're going to be with these people, right? Please be prepared for your role play, have all your documentation prepared and be on board in terms of the role that you're playing, then I can do it that way. But email me and let me know. Okay, so you either email me with.
I don't know how everyone else feels. Like, yeah, I'm just.
Yeah, and you're
Okay.
not the only one, Kaz. You're not the only one.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
So if you've got a group of 3 people said, yep, we're right, well, then email me and let me know your names and I'll schedule you. If you don't, email me anyway and say, please put me in a group. Okay, email me when you're ready to say, put me in a group. We'll be doing this, I mean, if the thing is that what I want to do is I'll book out an hour or 2 hours for your group. You'll be given half an hour each to do your role play, so you need to be prepared. And then we'll stop the recording. I'll send you the link. But then with the group of people that you're with, we'll swap over and then another student for your group will do their role plays. So then you'll be playing a role in their assessment. So if it turns out that you say, oh my God, I'm not ready, then that could have an impact on other people. You know what I mean?
So does that mean that we're assessed by you? You're involved in our meeting, and then we're assessed in like live? Is that it's
Well, I
not?
could assess you live, yes.
Yeah, so we don't have to record it and then attach it to an
No,
assessment.
it will need to be recorded. It needs to be recorded and it needs to be attached and sent in with the rest of your documentation, which is all part of your assessment.
Okay, I might need some help with that, but thank you.
Not a problem. Okay. Lena, thanks for waiting, Lena. Yep.
Okay, yeah, I was also going to suggest you to group us because it's a bit easy to get a group from the class.
Mm,
This time, everyone is busy. If you try to contact friends or families, they won't
mm,
understand what you're trying to say.
mm.
So, yeah, I think you've answered that. It's good to group us
Okay,
as a class.
okay,
And
not a
then,
problem. Well,
because
listen,
I was
before we,
looking through the assessment, and it's a bit complicated to look for three people to say, "Oh, come and help me do my assignment." It's really hard. So it's good if we book in three at a time and then we all do it together.
yeah,
Thank
look, the thing is that if you are working as a group, like if you're in a group, we can do the groups tonight. I mean, you can allocate from the people who are here, just put your names in the chat, but we can do that tonight before we finish up. But at least if you do that and you agree to swap details, contact details, that's between you. I mean, there are privacy issues around this. So if you agree to, that's between you. Then at least you could get together and unpack some of those requirements and discuss it with each other. You can work together as a group to see how best to approach it. That's another thing to consider. And I think that it always seems overwhelming before you sort of start on this because, things become more manageable the more you understand it. You've got to kind of got to dive in and start getting to know what's required and start unpacking it. Peter, yes.
Hi, Michelle. Just a
Hi.
quick question. So just with regards to the assessments, how does this
Yep.
sort of assessment rate compared to other units? Is this one of the more difficult ones? Because it seems a little
Not
bit,
really.
or is it pretty much
No.
on standard?
No, I think it's pretty much the standard. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's
That's good to
and
know.
this is set, by the way, by the requirements that you saw in that first PowerPoint. I've actually cut and pasted those requirements from the curriculum which has been
From the
set.
packaging rules.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
cool.
Yeah. So because I just sort of thought, let's just get this straight from the horse's mouth, right? So I don't want any confusion about wording. And so that is a direct cut and paste of what is the requirement. Yeah. So it's not uncommon that there's a number of different elements that units require you to do. Role plays are very common.
Cool.
So they sort of, and because it's a communication unit, written communication in a workplace is one of the focuses. An organisation foci, whatever, organisational protocols and what have you is a focus. And so there needs to be, they have decided that part of the assessment requirements reflect you following and understanding workplace protocols. Hence, there is the hypothetical organisation called First Access, which we use for a number, I mean, wherever we need to. I mean, other courses and other units. First Access is our hypothetical organisation. Okay. Does that answer your question, Peter?
Yeah, look, I guess the perspective I'm coming from is I know you've got this woman who's in a relationship with a person who's attending a course, and then her son's complaining about the fact that she's in this relationship. So I'm just, I guess that's the part I'm saying is a little bit
Yeah, the
interesting.
scenario. Yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying. The scenario, I can't tell you where the scenario came from, to be very honest with you. I don't know if it came from the place where this organisation, this educational institution, purchased material, right? Because they do purchase material. So it could have been, I haven't written it, right? So I don't know the source of the scenario. Scenarios do change. Okay, it's not, I have taught this unit before and the scenarios have changed in different places that I've taught. But having said that, the focus really, I mean, it's not as if the role play is, you're not role playing the scenario. Okay, that's the thing. And people can get a bit, that they sort of misunderstand and think, I have to role play this scenario, but you're not. The scenario is your background information. The scenario is what has happened, and now you're responding to that event, to that incident.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you're responding to that incident in an organisational capacity, in aligning with the organisational protocols. Okay. So, and that what's happened is that there's been the scenario, it's been an incident, that's occurred, the organisation is responding, and in their response, there is what they want is a meeting between staff, appropriate staff for this meeting around a newly formed safety and respect team.
Sure. So it's not so much of a focus on the actual outcome, it's more about the process we need to follow.
Well, the processes have emerged from the incident. So you're not, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So you're working in the context of you're not working with the clients directly, not in role play 3. Okay. I'm going to have to move on with it, folks,
Sure.
because if that's all right. Okay, so you need to seek feedback from 2 people. Okay, that's what you need to do. So submitting your assessment. Your recording will be emailed to you, the link. Okay, you need to submit your recording link with the following documents: your agenda, the email that you need to send to the people that you're inviting to the meeting. Okay, your feedback sheet from 2 people who are at the meeting, which is 2 of your student colleagues. Okay, a feedback sheet from both of them. Okay, and also your meeting minutes. So what I suggest is that I'm going to be recording the whole thing. Okay, you take your notes. I really suggest that you go print out your template from the minute template, your feedback sheet template, and take notes. Okay, and as you're talking, as you're facilitating a meeting, and then at the end, when you're seeking feedback from your 2 students, 2 student colleagues, take notes according to the questions that are asked, and then afterwards you can write those things up and then you can submit those documents. Your agenda, on the other hand, that needs to be completed fully. Your full agenda needs to be completed, and you need to be happy with that agenda, because you need to include it in your email to your 4 staff or 3 staff members that you're inviting to the meeting. The assessment criteria for this meeting is that you've used appropriate communication strategies for a staff meeting. So that would be your writing, your written communication, that you've active listening, questioning, how you're running the meeting, etc. That you're communicating respectfully. That in terms of how a meeting runs, that you've got the structure right. You follow workplace communication protocols. So, for instance, that could be at the beginning of a meeting that you do an acknowledgement of country, that people introduce themselves, that you introduce the meeting, stuff like that. Contribute to the aims and the objectives of the meeting. So you're running the meeting as well. And so you're making an active contribution to the aims and objectives of the meeting. You contribute useful information. You encourage others to participate. So this is part of your facilitation role. How do you engage people in the meeting? And you might want to think about, do I structure it and just say to people, okay, we're going to have an overall discussion now, or do you invite certain, people one by one? What do you think about this? Have you got a point of view? It's up to you how you want to do that. But you need to demonstrate that that's what you're doing. You're encouraging others to participate. You use communication strategies that show respect for the needs of others. So have a think about that. How can you do that? You might want to check in to see if people need clarity around anything, or if there's someone who does have a need for an interpreter, for instance. You might want to consider that. And you also need to take minutes. So we finished with that role play. That's assessment 3 meeting, and all the role play meeting and all the associated documentation. Then you need to do role play task 4, which is conflict resolution. There is a case scenario which is written in your information. There are 3 people in the role play, you as a facilitator and 2 other students, and you'll be assessed on your role as the facilitator. Read up on it. That is what I suggest you do, rather than me go into it right now. The purpose is conflict resolution. You need to use conflict resolution strategies. You need to add relevant information. This is the assessment criteria. You need to seek commitment from both parties to engage in resolution of the conflict. So you need to think about what communication strategies and tools that you're going to use to do that. You need to demonstrate that you're facilitating the client's needs, the client's need to communicate, and you need to demonstrate respect for diverse viewpoints. Really important that you understand the roles that are required in this scenario and play them appropriately to give your student who's doing the facilitation, give them something to work with. In terms of role play task 4B, right, it's another one, engaging an interpreter. The assessment criteria for this, right, 2 people are required for this role play. This is a really quick one. Okay, both of them can be quick actually. You and the person who is from the interpreter service. So one of your colleagues is going to be a person from an interpreter service that you will be connecting to. Excuse me. You will be assessed on your role in engaging and preparing them appropriately for a meeting. So the assessment criteria is that you have communicated appropriately with an external stakeholder and you have arranged access to a translating and interpreting service. So there are 3 role plays, and this is why I'm going through it. So this is how we're going to do it, which is what I've already said to you. Form your group of 4 people for all role plays, right? You can either do that tonight, right, or let me know and I can do it for you. If you do form your group, email me your group's names. I will schedule you and your team. I'm hoping to start next Monday, but that might be a bit too soon for people. Might suit you. You will have half an hour to complete all of your role plays, and then we'll finish recording. We'll move on to another student in the group. So be prepared when you come to be play a role in somebody else's role plays, and also to be the facilitator in your own role plays that you're going to be assessed in. So the schedule that I have available for your role plays is on Mondays, either between 10 and 1 or 5:30 to 7:30. There may also be the opportunity for a Wednesday afternoon between 12 and 3. There may be. So there's a couple of options there, but Monday and Wednesdays are the times. And I'm hoping that with the group that you come with, that we will be able to go through everybody's role plays in that block. I'll allocate a 2-hour block, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to get through them all. And I will send you all a Zoom link when I have those details from you. So I know it seems overwhelming. There's no easy way to sort of go about it. I just have to get in there, you know. And what I suggest you do is get your learner book and start reading up on all of this information. Become familiar with it. Become familiar with what the requirements are. Become familiar with your scenarios and what it is that you're required to do, and go back over this recording and my instructions or my support there to help you to get those things in order. Did you want me? Yeah. Yep.
Sorry, when you're saying like task 2 and task 3, is that when you look at our assessments and it says 1 of 4, 2 of 4? So is that breaking that down?
Yeah.
Is that breaking that down individually? So we start from 1 and then, because one's online quiz and the next one's the case study. So that's where you're saying task 2, that's coming under
Well, I think that task 1 is usually the knowledge questions. Task 2, in this instance, is a case scenario, case study. Task 3 is the role play. But in task 3, there's task 3 part A, part B, parts, there's different parts in task 3. And then there's task 4. And in task 4, you've got 2 parts to task 4.
Okay.
So your whole assessment for COM002 consists of 4 tasks, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But within task 3 and 4, which are the role plays, you've got individual things you have to do. So all up, you've got about 4, 5, 6, about 8 different sorts of things to do for your whole assessment for COM002.
Yeah. Okay, good. And also, sorry to be a pain,
No, you're
when
not.
we are doing our role plays, are we within our group, are we all playing a certain role, or do we all
I
take
would
in turns
suggest that you do. I just think,
preparing?
I suggest that you choose a role and you stick with it. So you play that role for your other team members, because let's just make it as easy as possible. Okay, Kaz, that's okay.
Sounds good.
So that would be my suggestion. It is up to you, like it's not mandatory, but I just think there's a lot of information. You need to be very well prepared. And I think, so, okay, Seb, that's fine. I might, yeah. So I would suggest that you choose your, you choose the role that you're going to play and you stick with it. And that just makes it easier. And it means that it cuts down the information for you as well, because you do need to sort of have an understanding and think about, okay, how am I going to play this role? What would this person in this organisation, what sort of role would they play? You know, to think about that kind of stuff, to give it enough grunt. Otherwise, it's going to be making it too difficult for the student being assessed if there's not enough there coming from the other students. That's why it's such a big team effort. Yeah. But I really think prepare as much as you can. And I know sometimes people, they get together, they prepare together, and they script things. That's up to you. It really doesn't need to be very long, right? And sometimes these things can get out of hand and they can keep going on, right? Keep it to 10 minutes. All righty. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave that for around the assessments. I'll just let you sit with that and start your reading and start your preparation. What I might do is just start putting together groups of 3, 4 people. Is that all right? All right.
Yeah.
With the people who are here. So there's Lena, there's Peter, Maribel, and Cass.
Yeah, Michelle, are we using
Yep.
the same agenda on the assessments, or we bring our own agenda?
You use the agenda that is provided. There is a template that is provided in all the information and in the first access kind of link. Go to your materials and it will be there. Use that template and type it up, and that is what you need to submit. Okay. Jane Milevsky, is your first name Jane? What's your first name?
Sorry, Jess. Jess.
Okay,
Jess.
so
Yeah.
Jess Milevsky and Lena. No, we have Lena. I've lost someone. Malia, Mark, and Yasmin. Then we have Seb. J. O'Wanden. What is your first name?
Joe.
Joe. Thank you. Joe Wanden. Sorry, Joe. Okay, so this is who I've got so far. I've got Lena, Peter, Maribel, and Kaz. I've got Jess Milevsky, Malia, Mark, and Yasmin. And Seb, Sophie, and Joe. And we will wait for somebody else to put you in into your group as well. How does that? So maybe Sib might. Some people there, but I will email. But we'll start off with those. Okay, I'll put that in the chat, and right. I'll email you. Okay, so we've got group 1, 2, and 3 at the moment. leave it with me, okay? I encourage you to start preparing and reading, and maybe we won't make it for Monday because it's going to be too hard. We'll see how we go for the following week, but I will, I'll have a look at it. Okay, so we have.
Just got a question, Michelle, if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Just because I haven't received last week's videos,
Yeah.
and I'm a bit worried that I'm a little bit behind.
Okay.
Yeah, so I need to make sure I've got that so I can read through the scenarios and all the rest of it.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, okay, that's fine. So even though I've said your group 1, I won't be scheduling you first. We'll leave it for a couple of weeks. We may not start this for a couple of weeks, okay?
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to make sure I talk to you beforehand. So.
Yep, not a problem. Okay.
Thank
All right, well, look, I'm going to leave it at that. It's nearly 7 o'clock, but I'm going to start the session now, okay? And
So is it the last unit for communication today?
I don't know. No, we just keep going. The last unit for communicate, last session, it is tonight, the last session, 002.
Okay, so this
That's
will be
correct.
my last time to come to class.
Right. Okay, Lena. All right.
Last unit for the year.
Might want to book in with me for a chat. Okay, well, I'm going to start PowerPoint slide and we'll quickly zoom through this. Okay. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live, study and play. We express our gratitude for the sharing of the land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. And for anyone here who identifies as First Nations, welcome to you. Okay. All right, I've just received texts to say that people are some chats, that people are confused. I get it. It will become clearer, but I'm going to move on with this session at the moment. I just recommend that you start reading your assessment. I think we're all familiar with the housekeeping requirements around class participation, respectful relationships. We will break at 7, which is in a minute, for 10 minutes and also at 8. Please remember that if there's any content here that makes you feel uncomfortable or, you know, it's too sensitive for you, please reach out to somebody who can support you with that. Please remember to be kind to yourself. Things can get very, very busy, as you well know, and I know that you're experiencing that. Tomorrow is a public holiday for Australia. I do hope that you make best use of that public holiday if it comes to you, because I think we all deserve it. Okay, we're looking at communication resources and facilitating meetings tonight. The 3 things we're going to be looking at is the translator and interpreter services. We're also going to be looking at digital media and their use in the community services sector and written correspondence protocols and style guides. So here's a quote from someone that communication leads to community. That is, to understanding, intimacy and mutual valuing. So what do you take from that? What do you take from that quote? What does that mean? How does communication lead to community?
It opens up pathways.
Yeah. Yeah. What sort of pathways?
Between cultures.
Yep.
Between, what's the word? Different ethnicities, different trades, different.
Yep. Sure.
Different values, all sorts of things like that. Yeah.
Yep. And different people. Would you say we all had communication needs?
Of course.
I'm sure that we can all relate to a time when we felt like that our communication needs were not particularly being met well. This is, you know, common in work as well. So workplace communication is critical. How we communicate and the style that we communicate in, and also the methods of communication are really important in our workplace between colleagues and people who we work with, and also very importantly with our clients. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the interpreter and translation services. And this is based on the fact that we know very, very well that, we have a very diverse community in terms of language needs, different kinds of language needs in terms of different abilities. And so it is common, and we certainly need to keep it in mind when we're working with clients that that we may need to call on an interpreter to come in and support us. So interpreter and translation services, they're two different things, really. There's four sort of areas that I think I'd like your input into, and maybe what we'll do is we'll have a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms, and I'm going to give each of you 1, 2, 3, 10. There's 4 breakout rooms. I'll put you into pairs or threes, and there's an interpreter service. In terms of language services, there's interpreter services, there's translation services, there's speech to text services, re-speaking, and there's also sign language services. So I wouldn't mind it if you did a bit of a short, really quick research on a service that you'll be given after our 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll share. But let's have a break, have a stretch. I've just bombarded you with information about assessments. So go grab a cup of tea or coffee, have a stretch, and I'll see you back here just before 7:10. Okay? Okay, we use an interpreter when there's no shared language, so if somebody has their first language is not English, for instance, or where the communication in language, where there's a barrier. We also use an interpreter if a client makes a request for language assistance, and so we need to have those details on hand to know who we can call on. And also when clients rely on people who are accompanying them, who interpret for them. And sometimes that happens too, that clients will do that. They will have a support person or a family member who might be there to help them understand and for you to interpret information. In those instances, though, it is common that the preference is to use a professional interpreter. That's the preference. And the process is that there is a very clear process and a protocol, and sometimes organisations do have protocols around using interpreters and best practice for that organisation, that the interpreter is properly briefed on the purpose of, the reason why you're bringing them in and what the context of the information is, the context of the meeting, the context of the session, what sort of information you're going to be passing on to that client. What is it that you need them to understand? So the context of why they're being called in and the context of the information that they're going to be interpreting is absolutely critical to the success of them doing their job and supporting that client in the provision, the receiving of information that you're providing. They also need to know what the outcomes are that you desire. And so, if it is that, you need your client to really understand a process, or you need your client to give their permission or their informed consent, that's really important. So really think about what it is that you want to achieve. What's the reason for bringing in an interpreter, and what is it that you want to achieve by that? And brief that interpreter properly. The better prepared they are, then the better service that they're likely to be able to provide to your client. It does say on this PowerPoint slide not to use family members or children as interpreters. Why do you think that's the case? Why would it be that the preference or the advice is to not use family members or children as interpreters in a workplace situation or in a client session?
Confidentiality.
Would be absolutely confidentiality for that person's, personal information. It could be around health matters that they do not want their family members or their community members to know about. That could be the case. Yeah. Any other reasons why?
They could manipulate things.
That's true too. Thanks, Peter. It could well be that if you do have somebody come in who, as an interpreter, that the information, and this is actually a situation to keep in mind with all interpreters around context, and actually that process of interpreting meaning, take a meaning from you, the information that you have, and interpret it as closely as possible within the availability of the language that they have to interpret that meaning in the way that you want it to be. If you have, and that's hard enough in some situations for a professional interpreter. Could be a conflict of interest. Thanks, Maribel. I'll talk about that in a minute. That can be hard enough because, sometimes meaning isn't automatic, doesn't have an automatic translation into another language. If you're using a family member, that personal relationship and those emotional ties can be, that they may the meaning that you want to convey may be interpreted in and passed on in a particular way. And as Peter said, it could be manipulated, maybe not intentionally, but it might be. So in terms of transparency of information, it's perhaps better to get a professional service. So Maribel mentioned that, I think it was Maribel who said there could be a conflict of interest. And I think you're right, Maribel, that it's those professional boundaries. Perhaps it's best to keep it in a professional space so that people don't have an interpreter does not have an emotional attachment to the client. It's a professional job that they're doing, and it's a professional process, and they don't have an emotional attachment to the information. So their job is to listen carefully, for you to work with you work with the client, right? So you must, when you're interpreting, when an interpreter is used, you still need to keep your focus on the client because they're your client. But the briefing of the interpreter needs to happen beforehand, and the interpreter, it's right and proper for them, for the sake of the client, in the end, client satisfaction and client outcomes, that they have as much information as possible and as much so that they can actually process what are the needs are here, what is the context, and what are the outcomes that you are seeking from this exchange. When we do use an interpreter and translation service, some of the things to consider are that try to use an interpreter of the same sex or gender of the client, and possibly also the same ethnicity. Why would that be the case?
Familiarity.
Yep, familiarity. Yep, that's possible. Anything else? Any other reason to sort of, use the same, prefer to, call on somebody of the same sex?
Well, they can easily build rapport with each other.
Yeah. Yep, that's true. I agree with those points. And the same with ethnicity as well. I mean, if the aim is this is about person-centered care that we provide all the time, and also, as you say, we build rapport. The aim is around building trusting relationships with our client. And so, obviously it would be ideally you would ask them, ask them, you don't make an assumption that people need an interpreter, or it might be a very obvious situation where you can make an assumption, or you might have somebody on standby. But you could find out, do you prefer to have? Is it a preference? Do you have a preference? You know, and if they do, then at least you know you're putting them in their needs at the centre. But if it is going to provide a situation where it makes it easier, people feel more comfortable, need to remember that if our clients are people who need support around mental health issues or mental illness, then we are obliged under work, to provide a safe environment, a culturally safe environment, a psychologically safe environment. And all of this actually contributes to that. So our clients' needs are at the centre of this. And if there's information here that we need to convey as part of the service they're providing, and we also want there to be, we want to facilitate a two-way process of communication, then that match is really important. And as far as possible, you would take into consideration the needs that the client has to have an interpreter match that fits. And if that means, similar ethnicity, perhaps faith background, sex or gender, then that's a consideration. Because in the end, you are not communicating with the interpreter. The communication is not with the interpreter. You're engaging with your client, and you're using an interpreter service as a tool of engagement. And we need to support them. It's a very critical tool. But we are engaging with the client. In some instances, many instances, in fact, you may not get an interpreter come face to face. It might have to be over the telephone. That's very common. So these are things to consider, important things to consider with the interpreter service. The role of the interpreter is really important. So the role of the interpreter is very clear. The interpreter conveys information between the worker and the client, and conveys information from the client to the worker. That's it. One way and back. Okay. They are bound by confidentiality, and this is why organisations probably will have a protocol around it, if not a protocol, a policy in terms of people understanding. And it may well be that you have to have in your initial discussion with an interpreter, that you need to ensure that people understand that. They would understand that, but as part of the protocol, it's about that sort of being very clear around that transparency. So interpreters are bound by confidentiality, and it would be very important in the initial sort of introduction to that exchange that you let your client know that. Because sometimes too, if an interpreter is from a particular language group which relates to a particular group, ethnic group, or cultural group in the society, the kinship groups can be quite large. And so there might be concerns around confidentiality that your client might have if that person is connected to their community in some way. And perhaps they are, perhaps they're not. But that issue around confidentiality and privacy would be absolutely critical in terms of protecting your client's interests. The role of the interpreter is clearly around interpreting meaning, right? They're not to analyse it or provide advice. They don't go outside of that. So it's a one-way, not one way. It's just it's a fairly straight line, and in itself that may not be easy depending on language considerations. Sometimes meanings are not easily conveyed or interpreted into another language. For instance, I can just give you an example that we use the word depression. We have an understanding of what depression might be in our language and in our culture, but in some languages there is not a word for depression. In some cultures and in some languages, they have a word, maybe happy, sad. That's it. In our language, in our comprehension and understanding of depression, sadness is maybe one element of depression, but we would understand sadness perhaps in a different way. So that's just an example that there are limitations to language. This is what I'm saying. And so the task of the interpreter can be quite a complex one. And so there's some things that you might want to consider in your discussion, your pre-discussion with the interpreter, in terms of them, you letting them know what's the context that I need to convey to my client, and is there particular words that your interpreter can say to you, actually that doesn't translate easily, and so perhaps you can have a discussion around how would you convey that concept, right? So that you can have that understanding of meaning being shared as close as possible to your intent, so that there's no misinformation, and also so that you don't put the the interpreter doesn't feel like they're in a situation where they need to sort of reanalyze or provide advice or re-clarify or anything. So if you have the time to have that initial discussion, a lot can be gained and all of this is about providing a service to your client, a person-centered service to your client. So that briefing before your interview or your session is absolutely really critical. And you might want to prepare for that and write down, be really clear in yourself the purpose of having an interpreter coming in and what the context is. In short, though, you would use simple English because of the limitations of language, and because we might have certain concepts in our language which we grow up with as part of our culture, which does not have an easy interpretation into another language and lingual concept. Use less words rather than more. So you're going to have to really sort of check your own communication here, When complex issues arise, remember to summarise. So keep it, use that thing around summarising, because you've got to remember that your interpreter is taking on your verbal stuff and decoding it, right? Mixing it up, processing it. They get it, right? They get it. It's in here. They've got to do that thing in here, right? Which is to turn it into another language, think about the concept and think about how does that translate into the language that I have, and how can I convey that, bring it out the other side and share it with the client with the meaning intact as possible. And how do I check in on that? So it can be useful to sort of be empathetic in the sense of understanding what does this job entail for them. So it's really important for you to speak directly to the client as well. So, and ask things like, ask your client directly, how are you feeling? Rather than say to your interpreter, right, can you ask her how she's feeling? Just remember, it's your client you're talking to, and your interpreter will step in and interpret. So if there is a lack of understanding by the client of what's been said, it's your responsibility. It's not the interpreter's responsibility to explain it. So you need to think about, how am I going to rephrase this? How am I going to summarise? How can I clarify? So simplicity is the key. And so really two important elements to using interpreter: summarising and clarifying, and keeping things simple. Let's have a look at I think we discussed a few of these slides. We won't need to go through them. Go through that. I was going to do that, but we don't have time. On that, and we have talked about that. This is a video called A Guide to the TIS National Service. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to stop share and take it off record, and then we'll have a look at it. Okay.
Can't see the video.
Yep. Okay, so TIS, what does TIS stand for?
Translator Interpreter Service.
It does, translating and interpreting service. What's the difference between translating and interpreting? Are they the same thing?
No.
Any thoughts? No, Seb, yours, no?
One's written, one's spoken.
Yep, that's it. You're right, Joe. Interpreting is verbal and the spoken word, and translating is the written word. So you translate documents. With the focus really has been, in terms of the information we've talked about tonight, has been mainly around interpreting, but really both are relevant. Translation is relevant too, and it has, I would say, some of the same considerations in terms of how you convey meaning and the authenticity of the meaning in the written word. And with our client base, both translation services and interpreting services are really important to consider in terms of getting information out to people in the way that best suits their language needs. And so I think that the translation and interpreter service is a very, very good resource for you to have in your resource bank moving forward into your professional life. Anything that came up for you about what they said that you wanted to comment on?
Seems
Yes.
very easy to use.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Seb, did you have something you wanted to say?
I just thought that was.
Sorry, I can't hear you, Seb.
Can you hear me now?
There's something wrong with your, I don't know about anybody else, but I can't really hear you, no.
Very,
Even
very
though you're-
quiet.
Yeah, very, very
Quiet?
quiet. You're muted, like you're muted, but you're not on mute.
Is it better now?
Not much.
Not much
Sorry.
better? Hang on. Let me see if I can get rid of these. Hang on. Sorry.
That's all right.
All right. Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yes, you're on.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that was very, very cool. I was just trying to think practically, assuming we're working at some particular organization and a client walks in off the street, there's a language barrier. I'm just trying to see practically how it would work. Do we go into a side room with an audio box with a sort of an intercom type thing? We call the number. I'm
Are you wondering how it works? Well, I think how it would usually work, if you will visualize somebody comes in, if you could take them into, or just call the interpreter service. If it looks like or sounds like clearly there is a language barrier here, then you would just call the interpreter service, find out from them what language, and call the interpreter service straight away and see if you could arrange something and start that exchange. I mean, as they said, the interpreter service is a national one, and so that can be really good for confidentiality and privacy if people belong to small communities. So I think that's how you would go about it. You would just make the call. Most organisations would have a budget line for translation and interpreter service.
Yeah, and so they would then be teed up with an interpreter. They would communicate their needs in coming into the organisation, and then would you speak to the interpreter to then facilitate their requests? Yeah,
that's it. It would have to be a three-way conversation. So if you do have, it depends on the the facilities and the resources that you have in your office space, but and it's also about privacy considerations. Maybe there is an office, a dedicated office and a separate office that you could go to that has a speaker system, right? That could be one way of doing it. Or if not, you just might be in an office that has a telephone connection and it might be passing the handset, it could be that. It really depends on the resources of your organisation. Either way, people have a right to have any discussion in a private space. So you would hope that your organisation, A, would have a private space that you could take your client into, and also have access to, you know, a telephone. But in the absence of that, if your client has a mobile phone, it could well be that you could exchange some information whereby whereby you can get their number from them and make a call from the main phone or the switchboard, and the interpreter rings them on their mobile phone, and you could go that way. So you might need to be creative around how you actually, where that initial connection and communication lands.
Very cool.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, thanks for that. We will move on. That's all I had for the interpreting element, right? What we're looking at now is digital media in community services in the health sector. So I can remember the days, believe it or not, where there wasn't any. Anyway, now we have a lot. We have web, email, social media, podcasts, videos, tablets, apps, newsletters, broadcasts. We still rely on newsletters because they're really useful. You know, they're really useful format to get a lot of information in and convey, but then they can be the mode that you communicate, use it to send out that information can be different these days. So and the intranet. So all of the use digital media time, and depending on the age group that you're working with in your service, there might be some that you use more than others. For instance, with young people, SMS and texting and, you know, the social media is used a lot these days. So you would need to, with digital media, you need to be absolutely up to speed with the policies and protocols of your organisation in relation to any workplace correspondence and any documentation that comes from your workplace about a client or about anything. So anything that can be created in your organisation. So you have client files, you have notes, you have information about services, you have policies, grievance reports, grievance procedures, you have all sorts of different things. Anything that can be viewed by the public, viewed by people internally, viewed by people who are clients, so on people who are known to the service or have a connection to the service, but also people who are not. So, you know, you have a website, international access, you know. So you need to be mindful of all of this kind of stuff. Anything that can be distributed, anything that can be modified. So maintaining authenticity is really very important. You don't want any of your material to be tampered with, corrupted in any way. And also that thing around preservation of documents in terms of being authentic and authenticity in terms of how well does some information hold for the years that you have to hang on to it under the law. So records, we have to keep records by the law, and so some kinds of communication and written communication or some digital media will hold better than others. Some of it you might need to back up. Your organisation will have policies and procedures. I can remember when I was working in an organisation, we had to back up very, very regularly. We also had to have backup files and stuff put into an off-site kind of facility, another off-site facility, because it was client files. So in the event for safety and security, and so we had to do that on a regular basis. And depending on what what sort of service you are with and what sort of information you have, it could also be a requirement by your funded organisation, your funding bodies, that you actually have security measures in place to back up and keep your all of that documentation. So you need to be really clear on the requirements that your organisation has and abide by them. Sometimes, you know, we still use, you know, take handwritten notes, longhand, and keep paper-based stuff. There might be requirements around that too, that even if you do translate those handwritten notes into typed notes and upload them, you know, it might be that you can't destroy the original. So, you know, what is the process for preserving those? How long for? You know, or maybe not. Maybe they don't. Either way, it's important that you find out what policies and processes and protocols your organisation has. It's really critical for digital media, particularly, I mean, including social media use. Social media, of course, has got its own kind of concerns and importances. So, you know, it's, you know, digital media is used more and more in terms of benefiting client concerns and role, in terms of connecting people to digital media and encouraging that. However, we do have some considerations in terms of protecting their confidentiality and privacy, and empowering them. You know, having it as a method that empowers them rather than continues to sort of, you know, keeps them vulnerable, basically makes them vulnerable. So what are some ways you could use digital media to benefit a client, do you think?
You can by introducing the client to certain procedures you're trying to get them involved in.
Yeah, can you give an example, Mark, around that?
Well, I used to work as a DDSO1 a few years ago in disability, and one of the young blokes I used to be with was very interested in cars and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So I introduced him to digital media on how to repair cars and to do the stuff that he was interested in.
Sure. Okay.
And then printed off a few things for him, and we got sort of working on.
Well, that's a really good example, that it was empowering. It was information. You linked your client into information that he or she could find on the internet, which would connect him to an interest, and that's empowering. That's empowering. So yeah, it's about, you know, that's a really good example. Any other ways that you could use digital media to benefit a client?
Knowledge is the key.
Yeah, knowledge. Yeah, growing their skills, growing their knowledge. Another way that digital media can be used, and this came up during COVID, was some mental health services, well, many services switched to online service delivery. Telehealth is one thing, so that's something to consider. That telehealth services could be really a really beneficial option to some people who might suffer a particular mental health issue, like psychosocial kind of anxiety or what have you. And it's a difference between them being able to connect to a service or not. That's one aspect. Another aspect is that, you know, I think it was Headspace were offering group sessions for young people online. You had to be a member. You couldn't just drop in. So it was a protected space. But they had, rather than young people having to sort of, you know, go, well, for a start, it was about maintaining continuity of the service during lockdown in Victoria anyway. And so they shifted to online so that people could still connect to a group's support service, and they did it online rather than cut out the service that because we couldn't, you know, couldn't attend in face to face. And maybe that's continued for some service organisations, that thing of how can we do this hybrid delivery or internet delivery? So services are now offering a combination of different ways of connecting to clients and engaging clients. And that has been one of the positive things as an outcome of pandemic lockdown. It's sort of stretched us in terms of providing different opportunities for a client to engage in service and service support. But with that also comes another set of protocols and policies around how we are to engage and how we are to protect people, considerations for our clients who might connect to that. We do not want people to be in an environment or a space that contributes to vulnerability or presents risk to their health and their well-being or their psychological safety in any way. So these are considerations as well. Anything else that people want to share about that? So this is what we've just covered, actually. Really important to follow policies and protocols on computer use and use of digital media, including Facebook, blogs, and Twitter or X. Digital media is an important part of workplace communication and can be used to actively involve staff and clients, and it can maximise welfare and improve working relationships. We're going to be looking at written communication now. And we're going to be looking at different sorts of templates or covering different kinds of templates in terms of written communication. So most organisations do have templates that they prefer you to use for writing business letters. And that should be all in, it's called a style guide. They may have what's called a style guide. And it's their preferred way for how you set things out. And these are things that you need to be mindful of when you're writing communications, which are coming from your organisation. So you are writing something on behalf of your organisation. And so any official correspondence, some organisations are so strict about it that they actually don't allow you to send any written correspondence from the organisation without it going through a higher level of seniority to check it. And some organisations won't allow officers or just any workers to sign off, put their signature to official correspondence, right? Some organisations will say, right, you write your official correspondence to whoever it is, another agency or what have you, then you send it up to your immediate supervisor and they will be the ones who will double check it, make sure that it is written in the way that is appropriate in their eyes. Everything, absolutely always, before you even send it to your supervisor, you must proofread everything you write. I can't emphasise this enough for spelling and for grammar and punctuation and all of that kind of stuff. Absolutely critical. So you proofread it, you get somebody else to read it, you do your spell checks, your grammar checks, all of that kind of stuff. You get it as perfect as you can before you release it internally for it to be double checked. And oftentimes it could well be that it's your supervisor or their manager who will be the official signer of any formal documentation from the organisation. But organisations have different protocols around that, okay? You can't take it for granted that just because you're working there and you have a client base or a caseload, that you are authorised to sign everything from the official documentation from the organisation to a referral agency or to the courts or to whoever, family members. It's not wise to take that for granted. It's something that you would need to find out when you start working there as part of your induction and as part of the discussions that you have with your supervisor. It's very different in different organisations. There is no rule of thumb. There are organisations who take it very seriously that any official writing from our organisation can only be sent and signed off by senior management, for instance. people who are authorised to do so. And they usually will make it really clear in the induction that certain, staff, certain roles from a level and under, they do not have that authority. So the authority might be that you can draft something because you might be working directly with that client. You're the best person to be drafting some information, but you still might not be the person who has the authority to sign it and send it. And that's just how it is. So on no account would I be taking the risk of signing anything on behalf of the organisation without checking out if you've got the authority to do so. Either way, you still need to make sure that whatever you write is within their written protocols. Think about your organisation that you're working with now, or some place that you've worked with in the past. Is this something that is familiar to you? Have you had this experience before? Or is it new? Or you have never written on behalf of an organisation?
Well, we used to do file notes in the disability sector.
Yeah.
And have to sign off on them as our daily file notes on the people looking.
Sure. And, file notes are a good example. I mean, they don't leave generally. They may leave the organisation if they're being sent to a referral agency or what have you. File notes are another form of written communication that, is usually there for internal purposes and to inform staff, really, other staff. And people do have the authority to sign off on file notes. In fact, the expectation is that if you are writing a file note about a client and you're the author of them, that you do sign them off, and you don't. Yeah. But in other organisations, you might need to write, in any organisation, in fact, you may need to write external correspondence to a range of different places, to government departments around funding, to other agencies or networks, to family members, to the client. It could be that there are other agencies, could be formal reports or something like that. So you just need to find out what authority you have in terms of signing something off on behalf of the organisation. Either way, you do need to work with the organisation's protocols and their style guide, and just make really sure that you've set things out in a structured way that is approved by them, and you write things in a way that is approved by them. So there is a high level of conformity, nothing creative about a business letter, nothing creative about a report. They're structured documents, they're formal documents, and, there are principles around layout, and, these are the things that you need to adhere to when you're learning how to write them. It's a good skill to have, though. Okay, it is really good to know how to write a business letter. So let's have a look at this. So with a business letter, you might want to do a draft. Sometimes it can take, it depends. These are things that happen with experience, but with a business letter, plan out what you want to say before you write it. So you write in what it is. Sometimes the hardest thing is actually getting started. So you just dump down, do the mental dump on a blank sheet of paper, right, and then you can cut and paste. So, and I still do that, with my writing. So, with a business letter, you put in the summary or the subject of the letter. So often you will see in a business letter the address, who to, all that kind of stuff. Dear so-and-so, or to whom it may concern, regarding, and then there's a subject line. Right? That is a very common standard layout that is used. So you might have, I always actually refer, regarding, and then having the subject line. So it actually points people, this is what this letter is about. Your first paragraph then is a brief background or a summary, right, of what you're writing about. And a brief background, put in the facts. Okay, let's see if I've got something on. So it is structured. You're talking about paragraphs, okay, different paragraphs. Your first sentence, right, which is your subject line, I would put that your first sentence is your subject line, you know, dear so-and-so, and then your subject line, which would be whatever the point is, just encapsulate it. Then put in your first paragraph, which refers to the summary and a bit of a background. Last week, we met. This letter is a follow-up from the meeting that we had last week in regards to so-and-so. Then you would put in your next paragraph. Every paragraph has a different focus or a different topic, and it builds on the story. Your next paragraph is, what the facts are, what happened. We agreed that blah, blah, blah. And then put in what action was required and make it just clear. Try not to use long sentences because they just don't work. They really don't work. The thing that you've got to remember when you're writing a formal business letter is that you're conveying information. That's all you're doing. You're conveying information. You have to give a background and then the current situation and then what you want to happen next. So that's it. The background, current situation and what is going to happen next, which is any required action.
You have to have the facts in there as well, wouldn't you?
And facts, yeah. Where would you put the facts?
I reckon the third in line.
Third in line? Yeah. Okay. And that's your basic structure. I'm going to stop it there. And I'd remember that because it's really important. You have your person who you're sending it to, their name, their address, and the date, attention, blah, blah, client's name, then a bit of a background in your first, bit of a summary and a background in your first paragraph. Put some facts in, the guts of it. Where are we at now? And some facts in there. And then the next one is what next? In conclusion, and what next? So if there's further action, if there's going to be a next meeting, or if our client has been referred to another service and their first interview is going to be on a certain date, so you're informing them and then you sign off. Usually there's a bottom courtesy kind of thing, which is, please feel free to contact me should you need any further clarification or have any questions. That's just a courtesy kind of thing. And then you sign off or you send it up to your manager for their approval. You proofread it before you do that. Make sure your spelling is right. I tell you what, I can't tell you how bad that can be overlooked so many times. Spelling, grammar, punctuation, those three things. Check it all. Get somebody else to read it if you want them to, but use those tools on your computer before you send it off to your manager for their approval and for their sign-off and forwarding it. Any questions around that?
Just one question I've got.
Yeah.
With you, like you just said, having someone read over it for you, would there be someone special in the organisation that would have to just give it a quick proofread with you, or you could just choose anyone?
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. I mean, it depends on your organisation. Maybe there's media people who do that, but I don't think so. Sometimes, it's just a colleague, you just, or you tee it up with them beforehand, like I've got to write a couple of letters. Do you mind having a look at them when I finish them?
Yeah.
Just an informal kind of thing. Yeah, but I would do that. I've done that heaps of times, but sometimes really depends on the topic and you do get better with practice.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be good to have a look at other letters that have been written in the organisation and sort of use them as a bit of a guide for yourself in terms of language. that you might use, because this is the other thing about working in the sector. You know, you get to learn different language, the language that organisations use, the language that agencies use, the language that is specific to your profession. So there'd be different language around mental health and mental health concerns, you know, and that's new language that you would be learning, and you learn when to use those and those words or those phrases. So it can be really useful to have a read of somebody else's, if you can. I mean, there might be sort of, there might be privacy considerations might be available to you, but this is where it's really important as part of your workplace learning to get other people's feedback so that it is written in a way that the organisation is satisfied with, that it upholds their reputation, it upholds the integrity of meaning, it is using language that is appropriate and is current, because language does change. And I can give you an example of that around personal pronouns. You know, personal pronouns like using he, she in letters these days is just not the done thing, you know. It just doesn't seem to be. So, you know, the government actually does have a language guide, right, communication and language guide, which is kind of really interesting, which is a best practice guide for the sort of language that is to be used. So, you know, it's just another one of those things where it's an area for learning, and it's dynamic and it does change. But to keep it short, your organisation will have a style guide or some kind of protocols. Find it out, talk to people, ask people. I wouldn't be too scared about, you know, I don't know that there's anything that you can get wrong, really. That's just my view, other than signing off a letter and sending it out if you don't know if you're authorised to do that. That's a big no-no. Any questions? Okay, it's 8:05. Let's have a break, and I'll see you at 8:15. Okay, and Seb, I guess you're leaving now, and we shall see you next time. Okay, well, I would say the really quick core of that message was, if you receive a meeting invitation, it's okay to press tentative and follow up and say, you know, do I really need to be there? How else can I make a contribution? And when it comes down to facilitating meetings, I'm just going to go through this fairly quickly. There are some fairly, some standard things. You know, I'm quite sure you're all familiar with meetings, but facilitating meetings need to be structured, they need to be well run, and they need to be very focused. So you need to develop an agenda. That's the first thing. And in your agenda, you have to, it's acceptable and to do a quick email around the people who you're inviting to the meeting beforehand to say, preparing for the meeting, any agenda items that you want to include. All right. And then you put forward your agenda, which is, these are the topics we're going to discuss at the meeting. This is what the title of the meeting is. This is where at the time, and, you know, the time and the location. And it is common to, I think, in some instances, against every item on the agenda to be discussed, put in brackets around about how much time you're going to give to discussing that topic, because meetings need to be managed. People speaking at meetings need to be managed, and time needs to be managed. You need to have a list of the invited participants, and you need to inform, you know, participants of the detail of the meeting. So you put together your agenda with your agenda items, the amount of time that you might allocate to speaking about each one. And if there is a particular person who's going to speak about that, you list the time of the meeting, what the title of the meeting is for, the purpose of it, the time, the location, and who the invitation is going to, the participants who've been invited, and you email it off to everyone. In a meeting, you do need to have a chairperson, the person who is actually running the meeting, and their role is to run that meeting. So they're the ones who open the meeting, okay? They welcome everyone. They start the meeting, keep an eye on the time, right? Sometimes you can delegate that thing around timekeeping. You can ask for somebody to support you in keeping track of how that meeting is going. It's very easy for meetings to just run off on their own, right? The topics get pulled and off they go. It's your job as the facilitator or the chairperson of the meetings to keep an eye on the time that a topic is being discussed and to finish it up, or to give people a warning. Okay, look, I can give you we've got 1 more minute to this topic. Is there anything, final that somebody wants to make, or can we have a discussion about our next action? What are we going to do now? And wrap up that topic. So it's challenging for the chairperson and the facilitator to keep an eye on the time and to keep that meeting going through each agenda item. And sometimes it can be helpful to have somebody supporting you as a timekeeper to give you a 1 minute sort of check-in, just to sort of say, hey, got 1 minute. Oh, thank you very much. Because it can be difficult to, it's a lot to manage when you're engaging people in a discussion. There might be some robust discussion about a topic, and you're trying to manage different opinions, different views, letting people have their say, making sure that the meeting, the discussion is being kept respectful and being kept on track. So you're keeping on topic, okay? And you might need, meetings are really good at running off on their own, and you might need to say, actually, sorry, I might have to intervene. Can we bring the meeting back onto the topic, please? It's very common to have to say that, and to say, okay, we've got 1 minute left. What's the next step you want to take around this, or can we have a decision? That's the end of the discussion now, right? But that's your role as the chairperson or the facilitator. Every meeting has got to have a leader and a manager, and you keep things on track, and you've got to keep the boundaries in there around how long you're going to talk about a topic. Keep the topic, the discussion respectful, right? Depending on the topic, things might get, people might feel quite animated about something. There might be a lot of opinions. You might sort of say, okay, look, I'll take 2 more opinions, or two more people, 2 more comments, and then we'll wrap it up. It's up to you to lead it, to have that structure in place, and to bring that discussion to a close, to agree on, okay, what are we going to do here? Is there an action that we need to finish that and move on to the next agenda item? That's your job. That is going to be your job in your assessment, where you have to facilitate a meeting, because you're going to be chairing it and running it and keeping it to the agenda. You need to follow the agenda. It can be common sometimes that you might have quite a long agenda, and, halfway through you just realise, look, we're not going to get through all this. And you might say, all right, look, there's some agenda items here. We're not going to get through everything. Let's have a look. We've got time for one other item. What's the priority here? What do you want to talk about? We'll hold the other 2 or the other agenda items over for the next meeting. But you hold it, you give it to the meeting, to say, what's the thing that you think is the most important thing to talk about, and the other 2 things, or the remainder of things, will hold over to the next meeting. And that would be needing to be, that you'd have to put that in the minutes, all right? That's the decision and the agreement that was taken at the meeting. So that's really the basics of running a meeting. But I don't think, they're not always easy. It's a skill, really, to run a meeting. But we've gone through this: develop an agenda, inform participants of the details, and communicate the details of the meeting. Okay.
I'm sorry, Miss, just a quick question on that with the minutes as such. Is that, I guess, the report, or is that just writing exactly what's happened in the meeting?
Yeah, the minutes of a meeting is a record of what was discussed and agreed to on each agenda item of the meeting. So with the minutes, there is a template in your information pack around the material, around your assessment. There is a template for the minutes that you will need to take for your meeting. But minutes are structured as well. So in the minutes, you have a list of all the people who attended the meeting. Okay, so the chairperson, when you open a meeting, normally what you would do is to write down the names of every person who was at the meeting. You need to know who's there. So if you're meeting in person, you'll pass around a piece of paper and people write their name, their position, and what organisation they're from, right? Or if it's an internal meeting, it's the name and their position. And then that will come back to you. That's the attendance. So you do an attendance sheet. Or you give that job to somebody else. Okay, you delegate it to somebody else so that you know who's at the meeting. If you've got people who have put forward their apologies, that means people have been invited, but they can't come. And they've let you know, I'm sorry, I'm going to be an apology for the meeting. You write their name down because they've let you know that they were invited, but they can't come. Okay, so you've got attendance, attendees, and then you've got apologies. And then you write down the discussion. So against every agenda item, you'll write down the agenda item, and then you'll write down what the discussion was about, and then you'll write down action. So what the next action, did you decide? You know, we discussed the work health and safety issue, and it was agreed that we need a new policy, right? So then you will write down action, so-and-so in human resources will write a draft of a new policy to be within the next 3 months, right? Something like that. So you have the discussion of the agenda item, main points around the discussion, and then what action you all agreed that you would take as a result of that discussion. And then you would go on to the second point, which is the second agenda item. And you would do the same thing. So it follows that structure. You write down the agenda item, you would write down the main points that were discussed in the meeting around that topic and any actions or agreements that were agreed to or taken as a result of that discussion. And you do that for every agenda item. If there are agenda items that were there that you didn't get time to talk about, you would say the following agenda items, you know, we didn't have time to talk about, but we agreed we'd hold them over to the next meeting. The last thing that you would put is next meeting. The date of the next
does
meeting.
everyone have to be in agreement to, like, all at once to be able to put it to the next meeting? Everyone's has to be in agreement with all of them?
Yeah, but that shouldn't be hard. That shouldn't be hard. You know, usually these things that you can get through fairly quickly. Or
if it doesn't agree though.
Well, you'd have to keep discussing it. You'd have to keep discussing it. I mean, as the chairperson, you have the authority to override and say, look, actually, I think that these are the things that are priorities at the moment. And, you know, I think that we really, on the basis of these reasons, I think that we will proceed. Or you can take it to a vote. That's the other thing. You could say, okay, let's vote. There's disagreement. Let's vote, you know, but you'd do it quickly. You wouldn't muck around with it. But in the end, you know, that may be that, you know, if you're going to be democratic about it, that you would take a vote. Yes, Malia. Right.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, just about what Robin said about with minutes, if people don't agree or something. I've got experience with, I work in the health system at the moment.
Yeah.
And I attend meetings and minutes and about, like, if someone doesn't agree with something, you take it on. And our managers have also said to us, you know, come talk to them about the issue privately if they want to.
Okay.
Well,
that's a good thing too. Thank you very much. So that's another strategy. And actually that links to, I'm going to bring this back up because that links to the point further down here, which is around, seeking contributions. So, you know, you have these discussions, right? You would encourage people to talk about things and have the opportunity for them, that they have the opportunity to have a say, okay? And people can come together. and decide on what, things that they might actually work on together. There are other things that you can do. I'm coming to what you said, Malia, right? It says here that you can actually have guest speakers and visual aids. Yes, you can, but you can also just sit around and talk about stuff. Often at meetings, you just want to get through information. Group activities and stuff like that. Look, it depends on what is the most appropriate and what people have time for. Now, coming back to what you were saying, Malia, that in terms of specific communication needs and specific needs that some members might have, and the thing that you raised around, well, what happens if people don't agree, and the strategy that your workplace has, which is we can set up a time with your manager to talk about it independently. That's a really good one in terms of meeting specific needs. And it mightn't just be communication needs. It might be the needs that different people have got, different participants have got around their view on the topic and their opinions on the topic. And so we've got different sorts of needs.
Yeah, because I found that
talking to the manager thing, if it's in private, what if there's stuff that was actually needed at the time to be done in that specific meeting instead of not having to wait? Do they set an urgent meeting in between that?
You could make another meeting time. You could talk to people. You could ask that person, how do you feel that you would like to resolve this? What strategy? Have you got any ideas about a strategy that you would prefer to talk about this further? It might be that somebody would like the opportunity to have a separate meeting to talk about that particular topic. I don't think there's any hard and fast or strict rules around it. That's that stuff around facilitating the resolution of any conflict, conflict about a topic or what have you. And it does take skill, but it is a good idea to have a couple of strategies written down for yourself in case you do need to bring them out. And it could be that strategy that Malia mentioned, which is, well, we could talk about this in private if you wanted to have that discussion, or we can actually pull that topic out of the meeting now and we can make another meeting to talk about it more fully, right? We can do it that way. Or ask them for how they would like it to be managed, what suggestions that they have.
Sorry to jump in there.
Yeah.
My organisation does that. Like if we have had a private meeting and then they want that to be, presented to the rest of the organisation, they will also put that in next minutes meetings and just do an overview as well to help bring everyone up to speed of what's going on.
Okay, all right. And then, the benefit of that, I would say, is that you are not excluding people, that you are being inclusive. You are recognising that people do have different needs and you're trying to accommodate people's needs to be heard and to have their view understood and to give people the time for that discussion to be had in a way that is appropriate for them and the topic that is important for them.
And in that where you just stated that about the importance and everything, now with would you set like a rate of like what's prioritizing if you've got more than one person that's needing to talk to, say, the manager privately, then obviously the extra meeting can help. But what if there's multiple and you do the rate on what's more a priority to that?
So I'm going to have to ask you again, Robin, what about if you've got did you say, what about if you've got a few people who want
that need to speak to, like, say, the manager and over time, but do they go by a priority list of what's more important of those people?
Well, I don't know. I think it really just depends on you could just ask people in what order they want to talk about things. It might have to fit in with your manager's timetable. You know, I mean, I think that if people can see that there's a spirit of cooperation, that then that's a good thing. But if you are running, if you can put it in terms of the priority according to the agenda items, okay, you could do it that way, because again, it's about organising, having a structure, and having it organised in some way. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that is, but also for if it's an extra meeting, then I guess before that, there could be an urgent subject that may come up that may be more a priority than say someone else has talked beforehand in that.
Well, you could actually, that's true, but if that was me, what I would say is we have called this meeting to discuss these matters first, and I would prioritise them. Another topic has come up, which I agree is important, but these topics were related to our previous discussion, and so these are the priority in terms of speaking about it first. That is what I would do. I wouldn't hold it off. That would be that would be my thought, because I think that's in a spirit of fairness, actually. But people might have different views, but that's how I would do it. Right, just wrapping it up, I just wanted to go through really quickly meeting minutes. Minutes need to be taken. Your meetings need to have a written record. So normally there would be another person that would be delegated. Sometimes someone will volunteer. Sometimes it's organised beforehand for somebody to take the minutes. So they would write down the discussion that happened around every topic of conversation and any actions or decisions that were made as a result of those discussions. It's really important that they're clear. They don't have to be really long-winded. Writing meeting minutes is a skill. Sometimes you write down a whole lot of stuff, really important to take your notes. And then when you come down to actually do your, bring it all together, and you need to do quite a bit of editing, it's a good idea to do meeting minutes straight after the meeting as soon as possible so that you don't forget. And so things that are really important or an emphasis, certain things that needed to be emphasised are fresh in your mind. And it's also good in terms of being timely so that they don't get forgotten about. Really important to do that. And then at the end of it, it's always a good idea to think about, okay, how did this meeting go? Did I achieve what I was hoping to achieve? Are there things that I would do differently? Do I need to organise things differently? Do I need to have more strategies up my sleeve in terms of, people and how they want to convey different information, all of that kind of stuff. So basically, that was all I was going to convey around meeting facilitation. Just how important the role is of the chairperson to be in charge of that meeting and to be organised. It can be very frustrating if you're going to a meeting and there's a chairperson who hasn't prepared and isn't organised. It's a real deal breaker. You've got to remember that people are giving their time, and they would expect, and rightly expect, the meeting to be run well, right? And so having a very clear agenda, putting a time limit on each agenda item is a really good guide. Running it strongly, being really clear, introducing the meeting, welcoming everyone, okay, being really clear about what the meeting is about, letting people introduce themselves, right, so that everyone knows who everyone is. You introduce yourself, right? So you open the meeting, you say clearly, the meeting is now open. My name is blah, blah, blah. This meeting is, a topic of this meeting is this. Can I get everyone to introduce themselves? Thank you for coming. And then you would say, okay, I've sent you all the agenda. These are the topics on the agenda that we would like to talk about today. I'll start with the first one. You may do it, most organisations now would do an acknowledgement of our country, and then you would begin. And so you would go to your first topic on the agenda and have a discussion around that, and then say, okay, what is our action from this? What decision are we making? Do we need a new policy? Do we need to set up a new committee? How often will our committee meet? Something like that. You write it down really clearly. Action. This is what I do. Action. And then write it down. Okay. Anyone else have anything else I'd like to say? All right. We'll move on to the second agenda item. If there's a project that's coming out, there might be a plan. We need a plan around something. Is there anyone who would be interested in working together on developing a plan? So can we develop a team to work on this project? So you would write down, these are the people who will form a project team to work on this particular topic. And, you know, when will your first meeting be? The end of the week, you write down, first meeting will be Friday, blah, blah, blah. That's your action. At the end of the meeting, you say, thank you everyone for coming. Just want to recap. These are the things we discussed. These are the actions we agreed to. Okay, we need a new policy, and there is a team, the HR manager is going to set up a draft on that and distribute it to everyone in 3 months' time. We also needed a work team to work on a plan around X, Y, and Z. These are the people who are in a work team. Their first meeting will be next Friday. Thank you for coming. We'll send you the minutes by the end of the week. An organisation on the planet shoved right inside a fucking eye. Okay. Any questions around that? Well, everyone, that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you, everyone, for coming. What we covered tonight was quite a lot of information. We went over the assessment and the role plays. We talked about the interpreter and translator services. We talked about digital media in the workplace and also with clients as well. We talked about written communication, you know, some main styles of written communication that you will need in the workplace and that you will need to know, and the importance of referring to communication policies and style guides. And we did cover the facilitation of meetings. I do encourage you over the next week, to sort of really start looking at your assessment requirements and start having a think about that. And for the people who were here earlier, I will be emailing you to set up, you know, a bit of a schedule. And so I'll be in touch. Next week, I'll be in touch. Okay. If you need my help, please feel free to email me. Have a great public holiday tomorrow, if you've got a public holiday, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank